now we're going to assemble the card base. I've got my bone folder and I've got the 3 pieces of the base. For this, we're going to use white glue to stick the card together. So we're going to fold along the score lines, and we'll take our bone folders and we'll just swipe it against that score line, and that's going to give us a nice crease. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up gluing along this little tab, and then while it's glued, but before it's dried, we're going to bend it in several different directions. That way we should get a nice fold, or a series of nice folds that will allow the card to bend in in a couple different directions. So here we are with my paintbrush. I am painting on this white glue. I like to do this so that I get nice amount of coverage. I like to take it to the very edge of my seam, and then I'm just going to press that down, and I'm going to fold it this way and press, fold it this way and press, fold it this way and press, and then I'm going to take my paper clips and I'm going to put them right along that edge, and that's going to press the 2 edges together, and we should get a nice solid hold there. We could use the tape runner, but in my experience the tape runner tends to come undone and the paper clips work better. They give me a better hold. We're going to set this aside, and we're going to do the same thing to the other pieces. Now you'll notice that I've got 2 mats down. I've got my mat, and then I've got the grid paper. I like to do this so that I don't get my mat gunky with glue and whatnot. And if I were using disposable grid paper, I might not have the additional mat down on top of my healing mat, but I like the reusable stuff. Mainly because I'm cheap and I don't want to keep buying stuff. Oh, that was kind of off camera there. So the reason why I hold the paper up like this when I paste the glue on is so that I don't get glue on any other parts of the paper that I don't want it on, because if I do get glue where I don't want it, then my card's going to stick together in places that I don't want it, and when I open this back up, it's going to be difficult. And it could even tear, and that would be a bummer. Sometimes I will put my cards, or the things that I've glued together, under a weight, or a series of weights, something with a flat bottom. But on this one, that's not what I'm doing. I'm pressing them together with the paper clips. Okay, I'll do a better job of keeping this one on camera. So again, I'm holding my paper up like this as I glue that little tab, well, paint it with the glue. Making sure that I get the glue all the way to the edges, and I don't want it to be sloppy, otherwise it's going to squish out when I press the seams together. Now here I am. I'm folding this in several different directions. Make sure that I get nice good folds. If we scored this evenly, then you're going to be able to open and fold the card in several different directions, and that's what we want. All of our base pieces have dried, and now we're going to assemble the base pieces so that we have a card. And then we'll have a base to attach everything to. So basically we're going to assemble or attach these little pieces onto this big piece. So obviously we've got to take the paper clips off, and I really like glue because it sticks better for longer. But the problem is, if you apply a whole bunch of glue, then you can kind of end up with rumpled up pieces of paper, and that doesn't look very professional. So when we're gluing smaller pieces like these tabs, we don't really have this problem. Now that I've taken the paper clips off of each of these tabs, off of each of these base pieces, I'm gonna fold them in all directions, and I'm gonna run the bone folder over them to make sure that they'll still fold in all directions. So we have to think about which part of the card we're going to be looking at when we look at the card. And we want to glue the card together so that it looks the best when we're looking at the front. So for this, I'm going to have this seam in the very back. And on these side pieces, I'm going to have the seam on the bottom toward the back. And I'm going to do that for each of the pieces. So we have a couple of options here. We can use our tape runner to fasten this, which that's what I'm using here. I'm just putting the tape runner on the edges. Or we can use glue. And sometimes I use a little bit of both. And so what I do when I do that, you might hear my son playing to my side. What I do when I do that is I put the tape runner down, and then I'll put the glue on the very edges, and that way my edges will definitely be glued down, but I won't have so much glue on my card that it will become wrinkly. That's the first piece that I put the glue on. We're going to glue it so that, or we're going to attach it so that the glued side goes on the bottom of the long piece. And while we're working on the other side, we're going to put our paperweight on that. And then we're going to do the same exact thing to the other side. And I really like everything to be uniform. So I want to make sure that I glue and tape the other side on the same way that I did that first one. And I keep a towel handy so that when I pull my paintbrush out of the water, I can dry it off. I put my paintbrush back in the water after I'm done painting glue on my pieces. That way my paintbrush doesn't get hard and ruined with glue. And sorry, I keep doing this off screen and I don't mean to. Okay, so I basically just pasted that entire piece of the card with glue after I put the tape runner on it, and I'm going to attach it the same way I did the other one. So here it is in the folded position, folded up, and here it is in the unfolded position. But we're going to fold it up, and we are going to put a paperweight over it. So this is just a little tray that I had with other pieces for this project sitting in, and I just put it on top because it's got a nice flat bottom. And another thing we could do, although we can't use the paperweight very well for this, is we could apply paper clips to the edges. But if we use the paperweight method, we're going to end up with a more flat finish. So we're going to let it sit there and let it dry. My son might start crying. Just thought I'd warn you. So we're going to take the weight off of the card base and this tray off of the card base, and we're going to make sure that everything still folds and unfolds the way it should. And now we are going to apply layer 1 to the card base. I find that these layers stick okay with the tape runner over time, and these layers stand a really good chance of buckling and turning all wavy if we use glue. So I'm only going to use tape runner on these layers, and we're going to try to center these layers over the section of the base that they go on. And on my layers, I just printed the lines from my template, so I'm making sure that those lines are on the back of each piece. We're going to put the inside rectangular pieces on the back side of the card. That way, when the card is open and sitting on a table, we will see those nice back pieces. So again, we're going to apply the tape runner near the edge. I find that if my tape runner goes over the edge, then I end up with little sticky pieces on my going over the edge of my paper, and then it tends to make the card stick together, and that's not how I want it. So we're trying to place this layer 1, inside the card so that it's centered, just like the other layer is on the other side. And so to do this, I'm going to just press down in the middle on the top, and then I'm going to reach in the bottom of the card, and I'm going to position that paper so that it looks fairly well centered. This is a whole lot of eyeballing. Once I get it that way, then I'm going to fold the card down, and I'm going to press, and we could run our bone folder over it, and that's going to press down that layer 1. Now we're going to put layer 1 on the other side. So we're going to apply that tape runner. I applied the tape runner to the other sides, but I did it in a still picture. We're going to put this inside the card the same way we did the other one, and I'm going to pause recording right now so that I can take some still pictures of this. I stuck layer 1 in on the other side, just like I did on this side. I took some still pictures though. Now we're going to flatten it, and we're going to run the bone folder over it, just like we did the other side. That'll give us a nice, secure hold. Now we're going to apply layer 1 to these front surfaces, and then to those 2 inside surfaces. And we're going to use the same technique that we did with the rectangular layer ones. And I'm not going to explain it for every one of them or show each one of them, but just know that you're going to do each of those surfaces the same way. So I just put the tape runner on layer 1, and I'm going to start with this right here, this side of the card, and we're going to try to evenly place layer 1 in the middle. And because we've got that tape runner on, it's going to be sticky, so we're just going to stick down one corner, see that we've got it where we want it. Once we do, then we're going to flatten it down. And that's actually a little bit uneven, and sometimes you can reposition the tape runner, sometimes you can't. I was just able to. Okay, so again, we're going to do those surfaces and then those 2 surfaces. And those 2 surfaces, we're going to use the same technique as we did for those surfaces, and these outside surfaces, we're going to use the same technique as we did for this one. I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to take some pictures, still pictures. One of the edges of the base layer was coming up, so I took my paintbrush and I dipped it in glue, and I just re-glued that edge, folded it back up, and put the weight over it, let it dry, and now we are ready to apply layer 2 to the card. So layer 2 is going to go over layer 1, and if you wanted the stitched squares like I have in my sample card, then you would use the stitched square die, as I discussed before, on each of the square pieces, and I didn't find a stitched rectangle die that would fit, so there's no stitched rectangles. So, oh yeah, I'm not using glue on that. Tape runner is what we're using on layer 2, and just like layer 1, we're going to apply the tape runner to the edges. We're not going to put layer 2 inside the card. I mean, if you wanted to, you could just cut more pieces of layer 2 and apply it inside the card, but I didn't do that. And so this rectangle is going to go here, and then we're going to apply layer 2 squares to each of the 6 outside surfaces of the card, just like we did layer 1. Try to make sure that you center layer 2. And I'm going to do the rest of this off camera because, well, with those instructions, it's pretty self-explanatory. The entire base of the card is now assembled, and now that we've got the actual base layer, layers 1 and layer 2 on the card, we're going to call this whole thing the base. And from here, we get to decorate the card. And for this, we're going to use Darling Donkeys, but you can really use whatever you want to use to decorate the card. The only warning I have is make sure that when the card folds up, it will fit in the size envelope you intended. And the size envelope I intended is an A2 envelope. So A2 envelope fits a quarter sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper really well. And of course, a quarter sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper is 4.25 by 5.5. So whatever you put on this, make sure that it doesn't extend past those measurements. And we've actually got a little bit of leeway with this card. Here's an A2 envelope that I made for something else. And you'll see that this card really actually has quite a bit of boundary around it. So that's cool. That makes, you know, between the card and the envelope, that's cool. That makes it so that we can actually decorate it quite a bit.